In this video, I'll be covering question 5, part D from the 2018 AP Calculus AB free response no calculator allowed portion of the exam. I cover parts A, B, C, and D all in their own individual videos, so if you want to see my other solutions, please check out those other videos. All right, so let's see what's going on with D. First off on D, make sure you know what this is the graph of. Whenever you've got a graph on a problem, make sure you are super careful to look at what this is the graph of. So what we have down here is the graph of G prime. This is the derivative of G's graph. So this is not the graph of G, this is the graph of G prime. Cool. So now we come through and they tell us G of pi over 2 equals 0. They say in words that the graph down below is the graph of G prime. And then what they actually want us to do on this is they want us to find the value of this limit right here. So whenever I'm doing a limit problem, I start off and I would say, okay, this is the limit as x approaches pi over 2 of f of x over g of x. And my thing is I always say try option 1 first, which is just to plug this value in and see what you get. So this would be equal to f of pi over 2 over g of pi over 2. And then what that's going to get us out, they told us that g of pi over 2 is 0. So we kind of know that we're running into something funky right now. But before we can move on, we do need to still figure out what does f of pi over 2 equal. So we're going back to this equation up top here, and we're plugging in pi over 2. So f of pi over 2 is going to equal e to the pi over 2 times the cosine of pi over 2. To find out that cosine of pi over 2 value, that's when we need to go to our unit circle, right? So pi over 2 is up top here. That is the point 0, 1. Remember, the x value is always the cosine of our angle, and the y value is always the sine of our angle. So we're looking for the cosine of pi over 2, which is going to be 0. So here we end up with e to the pi over 2 times 0, which tells us that f of pi over 2 equals 0. So popping that in over here, what we see is that we have 0 over 0. And so what you want to do is recognize that that's what they call an indeterminate form. And whenever we have an indeterminate form, L'Hopital's rule applies. I'm just going to call it LHS so we don't have to write it a whole bunch. So L'Hopital's rule applies. And they generally want you to sort of make a point of recognizing that and telling them how that L'Hopital's rule is going to be allowed to be applied here. What L'Hopital's rule says, just so that we know how to apply it, L'Hopital's rule says the limit as x approaches some f of x divided by g of x, if you get an indeterminate form, 0 over 0 or infinity over infinity, then you can apply the rule, and it tells us that that limit is going to be equal to the limit as x approaches that same number of the derivatives of those two pieces. And so what you're going to do on the next line is you're going to say, okay, well, this original limit that I started with here, I know that that's going to be equal to the derivatives of those pieces. So the limit as x approaches pi over 2 of f prime of x over g prime of x. Well, f prime of x we found in previous problems. We found in both of the A and B from up above. But if you need to just kind of know that on the fly, right now we would say f of x equals e to the x times the cosine of x. So what you're looking at here would end up being a product rule. And so the product rule recipe that I use goes f g prime plus gf prime. So I labeled that chunk the f piece, that chunk the g piece, and then I follow the rule. So f prime of x would equal, first go grab f, that's e to the x, multiply that by g prime. The derivative of cosine is negative sine, you just have to have that memorized. Plus, then go grab the g piece, cosine of x, and then multiply that by f prime. The derivative of e to the x is e to the x. So that's something that, again, I did that in two previous videos for this problem, so you can also go back and check it out in, I think AA's video has it in smaller bite-sized chunks if you want to see it that way. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come through and we're going to plug in pi over 2 to those. So this would equal the limit. Oh, no, we don't need the limit anymore. Once we start plugging in values, now we just get to plug it in. So this would be f prime of pi over 2 divided by g prime of pi over 2. So to find f prime of pi over 2, we're going to come down to that derivative we just created down below here, and we'll plug in pi over 2. So f prime of pi over 2 is going to equal e to the pi over 2 times the negative sine of pi over 2 plus the cosine of pi over 2 times e to the pi over 2. So we already had our unit circle working over here for that pi over 2 position. So to clean this up, the sine of pi over 2, that's going to be the y value out of there. That's going to be 1. So we end up with e to the pi over 2 times, and then there's a negative right there, so this would be times negative 1 plus the cosine of pi over 2 was 0, and then times e to the pi over 2. So we end up out of here cleaning up and getting f prime of pi over 2. Negative 1 times e to the pi over 2 gets us negative e to the pi over 2, and then 0 times anything is 0. So on the top here, we now know that this is going to be equal to negative e to the pi over 2. We don't have a calculator, so we don't get to do anything further with that. But we also know we're probably not ending up in an indeterminate form, so we're going to be done. Now we need to go find g prime of pi over 2. Well, that's back to our graph here. So what that's saying is when I plug in pi over 2, what is the y value that comes out of there? Because this is the graph of g prime. So I'm plugging in pi over 2. The trap on this was to try to read the derivative off of here. You don't want to read the derivative. You just want to find the values. So at pi over 2, the value of my derivative is going to be 2. So then this ends up being all over 2. And because it worked out without an indeterminate form, that is our final answer for our limit. So we need to make sure we come back through here and tell them that our limit on g of pi over 2 was equal to 0, then identifying that that gave us an indeterminate form, that would have been 1 point. We would have then gotten 1 point for actually going through and applying that L'Hopital's rule, and then we would have gotten 1 point out for our final answer. So 3 total points on that problem. Thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, please click that like button and subscribe. And also share it with your friends and anyone else you know who might be crying about an upcoming AP Calc test. You can find more videos from me, more sample AP Calc questions, and my complete AP Calc study guide over at my website, apcalcprep.com. Have a great one.